So in this vlog, we're going to jump into the hobby. We're going to jump into the narrative a little bit, and I'm going to be exploring, or I should say, asking this question from a BattleTech perspective. But this can apply to any type of miniature game, and I want to encourage you to explore, port over, and in turn share your ideas in the comments for some suggestions that I can utilize, things that I can pull in to my own games. So there's this idea, yes, I love tactics. Yes, I absolutely want to win. I want that tabletop glory, but there's a reason why I enjoy playing miniature-based war games or miniature games, because we're literally, I'm trying to step out of space and time. I'm trying to create this narrative through the visuals of miniatures, painted miniatures. They could be tabletop, 3D terrain, a good rule set, a solid rule set, a workable rule set, and friends to come together and create something on the tabletop. Spend 2 or 3 hours outside of real life, or 4 or 5 or 6 hours if it's BattleTech, and create some memories. Yes, tabletop glory, but looking to answer the question, if I was in this alternate universe, and I'm the mech warrior, or I'm the mech commander, what choices would I make? How would this battle impact? How would it play out? So the visuals are very, very important. And we want to I try to approach them from 3 or 4 different angles. And that's kind of the checklist I want to build here. So the first is painting your miniatures. Painting your miniatures. And I'm not saying you can't play unpainted, or there's times you might not want to play unpainted, but this goal, right? This goal of creating this narrative, of creating this alternate reality, this alternate universe in that moment, this vortex on the tabletop. You might be in the gaming shop, other people playing, but when your eyes meet that table and it's your turn and you're looking at the units, you're literally like in the game. So having painted miniatures is important, and they don't have to be super perfection. We're at different places of the hobby. We have different time commitments, but given all the tutorials on YouTube and a lot of great resources and paints, it's pretty reasonable to get things to tabletop. 3 or 4 colors, some highlights, a wash, some highlights, some details. Basic basing is a great way to pull out your miniature. You can get stuff looking pretty good, pretty fast. And then over time, when you have more time to dedicate, work on those miniatures to bring them up higher, to bring them up better. And absolutely, I realize I am not the best painter in the world. I consider myself a wargamer and a tactician first. When I really focus, I think I can produce some amazing stuff. But that said, I realize even doing this for a number of years, yes, it can be intimidating. Painting. Yes, there is a lot to it. Yes, it is a skill, much like tactics, that takes developing. But sometimes we got to attack it head on. We got to follow it head on. But focusing first and asking the question, are your miniatures painted? Tabletop is fine. 3 colors, some details, a wash, basing. That's the first thing we start. The next thing we start, of course, is the terrain. 3D good terrain. Now, there's kind of 2 types of terrain. There's what I call club terrain, and then there's narrative or hobby type terrain. And these are just my definitions. Club terrain is a little more resilient, a little bit more generic, because for a lot of us at a hobby store or literally a gaming club, you're packing it up every week. You show up on Monday to play, you take out the box, you set the terrain up, you roll some dice, you blow some stuff up, you have fun, someone knocks part of it on the floor, you put it back in the box, it goes on the shelf. Rinse and repeat 2, 3, 4 years. I mean, there's still some terrain pieces I make. I always sign on the bottom my name and the date, just because I'm curious to see how many years they can go, or the sets and where they make their way. There's terrain at certain places that's like, Fritz 2008, Fritz 2010. And this is weekly terrain being played week after week after week. That's been repaired, repainted, added on, taken apart. So this idea of club terrain is very, very resilient terrain. I say that because you would be amazed. Again, YouTube tutorials. I'm pumped. I'm excited. I'm into this narrative. I want to encourage you guys. Looking at that, cardboard, basic basing and some bits and some craft paints, not like expensive model paints, just craft paints, you can do a lot. You can create a really awesome set of terrain in a box, themed. I have about 4 or 5 themed boxes, City Fight, City Tech, ruins and kind of generic fantasy, gothic grimdark buildings, jungle terrain, desert terrain, hilly terrain, mix and match. That's the framing of your miniatures. So being able to play on actual 3D terrain as opposed to like, okay, here's a cutout of paper and it's painted green, it's colored green, and it says forests. I mean, you could play abstract. Sometimes that happens, but really committing to saying, hey, I've got my army, I've got my terrain. Now, hobby terrain, this is the type of stuff that we see in magazines or online where you're like, wow, these are like miniatures. This is you're down in the man cave with your friends and this terrain doesn't get packed up and move around. It's like railroad hobby terrain. It looks amazing. It's detailed and might have light effects. Yes, absolutely. That's where I want you to go. That's where I want to go. That's where I've gone with some of my terrain sets. But again, starting out in the beginning and collecting and building and upgrading and painting, you've got your miniatures, you've got your terrain. The next is a gaming mat, to have something that can roll out. And this could be a pre-printed kind of generic type mat. This could be a type of battle mat. It could be old school. You get some kind of thick canvas and a lot of glue and put down rocks and rubble and texture and paint it. I mean, to have a dedicated gaming space other than a gaming table or just kind of a flat, no-color mat. It could be specialized. It could be very specific and focused. Something with a little bit of thickness to push your models around on, something to help frame your terrain. So now we have the start of the simulation, right? Now we've got the start of something that when someone walks in, they don't know anything about wargaming. And they're like, yeah, this looks really interesting. This looks really cool. Now, effects, battle effects. What I have for BattleTech is through some cotton and some modeling supplies and some kind of recast, broken up mechs to create smoke effects, smoke terrain, ruins. I've got a mech that's a Battlemaster, just a Battlemaster foot. Smoking, the idea if it explodes, ammo, it's just there. I've got some mech arms and some mech legs, and using this to build the narrative. So when I play BattleTech and I'm advancing my mechs, if I shoot missiles at you and I miss, what I'll do is wherever your mech is physically on the map, and I do this the same for mine, put down some smoke effects in the area. I mean, imagine if your mech fires off hundreds of missiles. Some are going to hit, some are going to miss. That's going to affect the area that you're shooting at. So putting smoke effects, blowing stuff up, having little craters you can put around. When one of my mechs loses an arm, I drop the physical arm in the hex. Now in the rules, you can pick that up and bash. But by doing that over the course of the game, having these effects, and it's a little token case with them, 3D effects, smoke, damage, craters, you get to kind of see, and I leave it there for the whole game. And likewise, if someone shoots at me, I put a few near my mechs. They're completely visual. They don't block line of sight, complete eye candy. Don't block line of sight, don't change the game, no obscurity. They're just there. It's kind of neat to see over the course of the battle where the action is, where the action's going, how it evolved. Again, telling this narrative. And at the end of the game, being able to step back and just see, yes, who won, who lost, but check out this table. Check out the carnage. Having some buildings that you can replace with piles of rubble, having stuff to be damaged. Again, even if there's no in-game effects, just complete visuals. So having your painted models, your mat, your terrain, your damage effect box, working and building over time. I mean, for some of us in the hobby, you can build this pretty fast. For others, it's something that you can work on over time. The last two pieces, optional in my opinion, but help. Music. trying to just get a little music. Now, we can't do that, of course, if we're at the club. We're being respectful to other players, and we have to be mindful of that. But when I get together with my friends, if it's Battletech, we're pulling out that 80s music. If it's 40K, we've got the Grimdark. If it's historicals, we've got the Roman War chants and the Legion chants, playing that and just pulling that in. And can we get to that narrative? Do you have your playlists? Are you ready to have your playlists? And it's funny, certain music gets me pumped. Certain music gets me pumped. We had a massive playlist of a couple of hundred songs that will pull in just kind of music from soundtracks, movie tracks, all that. And I'm playing Chain of Command World War II, and I was doing pretty well, right? Doing pretty well. I wasn't losing, I wasn't winning, but I was holding my own. I mean, I was in a solid place. And I had a slight advantage. I'm playing late war Germans. I play late war Germans because I want the tanks. I love tanks. I want to play, the Tiger, the King Tiger. I'm all in for the tanks. So I'm doing well. And I'm playing tactically. I'm massing up most of my infantry squads against this wall. So I've got this wall, behind this wall. The Americans are on the opposite side of this street in a building. They've got some fortified positions. I am cautiously bringing my tanks up, but I have to be very cautious because I know there's some ambush teams, bazooka teams. So rather than rushing my tanks up, I need to have them covered. I need to have overwatch. It's slow going because invasion of Fortress Europe, there's a lot of places these Americans are hiding with anti-tank weapons, and they will smoke my heavy tanks. So I need to get those tanks in position, switch to from armor piercing to high explosive, and just start blasting those houses and then, move in. That was the plan. And I was executing it very, very well. Soundtrack is going. We're getting pumped. Gladiator comes on. And Gladiator is one of my favorite movies ever. I mean, are you not entertained? I mean, Maximus is like one of my heroes. And I'm just like, Gladiator came on. And it's building, the battle scene in the beginning of Gladiator, unleashing that hell. And I find myself getting caught up in the music, and I'm like, I have to charge. Like the music is getting me pumped. I'm like, this is a sign from the gods. I mean, is this like a sign from Wotan? I need to charge. And charging in Chain of Command is absolutely brutal, especially if you're charging a fortified position. Americans behind the wall, in the house. I mean, and my tanks aren't in position. I'm like, do I charge? Do I do this? But the music is dictating it. Glory is dictating it. And my opponent, they know I always charge, but it's like unexpected where it's like, no, like, dude, wait a couple of turns, get into position. And I'm like, I got to charge. So I say that, and I charged, and it was insane. I mean, it was just absolutely, Fury of Wotan charging there. But I say that because I lost the game, but I say that because that charge was glorious, and I can taste it, and I can see it, and I can feel it because we had the terrain, we had the painted miniatures, we had the smoke effects, we had the battle damage, we had the music playing, we had the snacks. I mean, everything was set in the game, and in that moment, win or lose. It's like Conan. It doesn't matter who won or lost. It matters that the few stood against the many. So pulling in that narrative was absolutely amazing. So can you utilize music to do that? Appropriate and in the right place and respectful of others, not blasting Gladiator at the club. The other thing is, and this always isn't possible, and this will kind of lead us out into the comments for you guys, this idea that the table is the narrative battle space. And whenever possible, a side table or next to the table, or if there's the gaming mat on the table, there's a space at the table that's not the gaming mat, keeping your books, your dice, your charts, your battle sheets, your stats, everything there. Not having that on the table. Now, when I roll the dice, I'm a firm believer in rolling the dice where the action is. So if my mech is engaging your mechs, I'll roll the dice near my mech. So this way you can see what hits, where, how many, and then when that's done, take the dice off. So we're focusing on the action, but we can see the fairness and the transparency of the dice. But you see a lot of gamers that just the dice are all over the place. The rule book is on the table. You got your food and your drink on the table, And it's like, you're killing the narrative, man. You're killing the visual. There are a couple of videos out there of me playing where I'm doing this. Now, again, this is the ideal. Sometimes, back in the day, comic book heaven, massive, massive respect, Bishop setting up everything for us to play. We were literally playing. Sometimes we had so many players. You're playing outside the store in the hallway of a mall on a folding table. And I wouldn't trade anything for those memories and the dedication and the love shown. But in playing there, sometimes you don't have room and you need to have your books somewhere and you got something to drink and some food and you need it to have somewhere. So I don't take offense at that. I understand that. Sometimes you have to do that. Sometimes I've done that. But if we're trying to create that narrative, if we're trying to create the very best that we can, then, let's keep the table for the table. I mean, historical wargamers are like, dude, there's never any food or drink on the table. Like, the battlefield is sacred. The miniature battlefield is sacred. Like, don't even do that. You won't even get a warning. Like, just crazy. So there's always some give and take. But if we're looking to set up that ideal, try to keep that to the side on a side table or off the gaming mat, push the mat so that you have a little bit of room on the table or extend the table. Keep the narrative of the table sacred. It's like holy ground, McLeod, just absolutely from that perspective. So pulling in this narrative, playing with the miniatures, trying to step out of space and time, what is your secret sauce? What are you trying to do, fulfill? How can we, as a community, pull in all of these wonderful aspects, all of these reasons why we're playing with miniatures? And I guess I could say the second also applies for board games. I'll kind of make a note to cover and explore that. How can we do that? What are some of the tools, the tech, the secrets? What things are you doing to capture and really convey that narrative?